Hi everyone, Suzanne here. I hope you're all well and welcome to Sew Custom. Today's video is something a little bit different. So this isn't a straightforward video like my usual ones, so I'm not just sewing up a garment, coming to the end and showing you guys the result. I thought I would do a little bit more of a vlog today. So this will be new for us both. If you're interested in seeing that, then let's get started.
Lots of you guys ask where I get the inspiration from for each of the things that I make, and the answer to that, in short, is here, there and everywhere. But today I thought I would take you guys to a shop where I've seen a couple of dresses that I'm really inspired to make. So we've just left home, headed down towards a shopping centre that's quite near me. It has a Marks and Spencer's, it has a Boots, and it has a Next, where today's inspiration comes from. So the first one, which is the one I'm going to make and the one you would have seen in the intro, is this dress. It's a midi length and it has some really nice details. And the first of those is this nice ruffle piece that's sandwiched in between princess seams. It has a puff sleeve, some nice little gathers at the cap of the sleeve, and then the skirt is just a front and a back, no darts or anything, it's gathered into the waist, and then it has a ruffle piece at the hem. The center section of the bodice is lined, and the inside is really basically finished with overlock stitches. And from the back, same details again with that ruffle going down the princess seams. The skirt is also lined, and it looks like the lining fabric they've used here is a cotton voile, very lightweight, and then it just has an elasticated waist but at the back only, which should make for a rather comfortable little dress. And the second dress that I'm very inspired by is this one. Again, like the first, it has some really interesting details. So the skirt on this one is very full, but what I love about it is the fullness comes below the hip. I really like that shape in a dress. And above the hip, it has a waist piece that extends down at an angle to the side seam, as I said, giving a super interesting shape. And then the bodice, the darts have been transformed at the bust into gathers. It has a V-neck, a fluted sleeve with some nice little gathers at the cap, the bodice and skirt are both lined, again with some sort of lightweight voile, I think cotton, and from the back the details are amped up even more here with that gorgeous cutout detail. The skirt has corresponding side panels that match up with that angle at the front on the side seam, and then again a lovely full skirt below the hip. And for closures on this one, it has these buttons that run down the centre back. They have this little cutout on the bodice, which is just inside, I think, the princess line. And then at the neck, another one of those self-covered buttons for a closure. So I will definitely be taking some of these elements, if not all, for a dress in the future. I am sure of it. Do any of you guys do this? Like, go into a shop and really pick apart the construction of a garment? I do it all of the time, so if I see anything that has a wee detail that I like, I'll really investigate. I'll take photographs, and then when I get home, I'll try to recreate each of the different shapes. But before we do that on my inspiration dress, it was such a gorgeous day this day that we decided to go for a walk. So you've just seen footage of a beautiful little walk right along the lagan on the towpath, and if you walk for long enough it leads you to this gorgeous tiny little park that's always planted so beautifully. And then before heading home we decided to reward ourselves with coffee and cake. And not only did my husband have to stand and model the dresses earlier, he's having to do the coffee, carry the coffee, get the muffin, all while I'm rather embarrassingly trying to film. Can you tell this is way out of my comfort zone? If you haven't tried one of these Victoria sponge muffins from Marks and Spencer's and you have the opportunity to do so, I would highly recommend them. They are delicious. So now back to things that are a little bit more familiar. So I'm starting with my woven blocks, my bodice front and back and my sleeve block. And for the front, the first thing to do is to create those princess seams and the V-neck. And because I'm creating a V-neck here, I also want to reduce the gape along the neckline. I've shown both of these techniques in previous videos. I shall leave those linked below, but hopefully you can see here how you can quite easily go from block to a really basic pattern quite quickly. So on to the back, and here I need to reshape the neck to match the front and also give myself those princess seams. So the difference here is I haven't taken the dart into account at the waist. I've also straightened out the side seam a little because I want to give myself that additional width so I can get the dress over my bust. So that's the front and back princess seams and neckline done. Now to take care of the ruffle. So I've measured that princess line on both front and back, marked on my pattern what that measurement is. I've times that by 1.5 to get the length. And then for the shaping around that outer edge, I've just created a rather subtle little curve there. This is another technique I've shown how to pattern in the past. I'll leave that video linked below. So that's my front, back and ruffle. Now for the sleeve. So because the sleeve is puffy at the top and also has volume at the bottom, all I've done is use the slash and spread method to open up right along the sleeve head. So I've opened up each of my slash lines by about 1 inch or so. I've made the sleeve elbow length, and then along the bottom edge I've opened up my slash lines by about 1 centimetre or so. I don't want as much volume around the cuff piece. So that's the top half of the dress patterned. Now for the skirt. And this skirt pattern I've just taken from my stash. I patterned this for a previous make, which some of you might have seen. It was my bishop sleeve dress with tiered skirt. So this is the skirt pattern I'm using here. I'm just adapting it slightly to match up with the inspiration. So normally at this stage I would make a toile just to make sure that the pattern all fits together. I haven't made any mistakes while patterning. To check the appropriate fabric, whether the weight I'm using is too light or too heavy. So because I've used all of these patterning techniques in the past and I'm relatively confident with them, I decided that my toile would be more of a wearable toile. So I'm using this gorgeous linen fabric in this lovely biscuit colour. It has a good weight to it, really beautiful quality. So I've went ahead and sewn it up, and this is what I get. So I've got my V-neck, I got that centre front seam which I've went ahead and top stitched, got my ruffle all in place. I've top stitched that seam to make sure that my ruffle sits exactly where I want it. I've given it a double folded hem. I'm very happy with the sleeve shape. I think it has enough volume, and instead of adding the bias binding from the inspiration to the cuff, I decided I would pop in a little bit of elastic and give myself this little frill detail. And then on the back I got that ruffle continuing down those princess seams. I cut my fabric on the fold in the center, and I've got that elastic at the waist. And then for the skirt, I've lengthened that pattern that you seen earlier to just below the knee, and I've added a few inches to my ruffle pattern piece in order to make this one. I've used the technique to sew this one on again in a previous video, and I'm super happy with how this has turned out. The only thing that I would change about this is the length. When I first put it on, I felt a bit overwhelmed by all of the fabric. Like, I absolutely love it, but I think this dress would look good in a shorter length as well, which brings me on to my next one. So I had this fabric in my stash. It's embroidery anglaise fabric, and it has panels running from selvage edge to selvage edge in different designs. And in between those designs, it has this lovely laddering effect. So the challenge with this one is how to cut out all of my pieces so that I'm maximizing those gorgeous designs. So for the front, I've decided on the daisy pattern. I'm cutting this on the grain, and right along the center front, I've tried to position that ladder detail so I have two lines of it running up the center front. And for the back, I've given myself a center back seam, and I'm using the eyelet pattern from the fabric in the same way as I did the front. So I've given myself that gorgeous laddering right down the edge of the center back. And then to sew these pieces together, I'm placing my needle right on the edge of that laddering, and I'm taking this super slowly. Because this is on the center front and center back, it will be really visible if my stitches are wonky. So trying to be as careful as I can be, and I'll be finishing my edges here on the overlocker and then lining the center front and center back with that cotton lawn fabric I showed earlier. So then for my side panels and my ruffles, I've used the same pattern on the fabric, which is these little discs with daisies in the center. And then to assemble the ruffle, I've just sewn that shoulder seam together, and because this seam will be somewhat visible, I've decided to fell it. So to do that, I'm trimming down the seam allowance on one side, pressing the other over the top, tucking that raw edge in underneath, encasing the trimmed edge, pressing into place, and I'll stitch right over the top. And then for the same reason as the shoulder seam, I'm going to finish the hem on the ruffle using the double folded method. So just folding in underneath by about half of my allowance, pressing into place, folding again by the same amount and pressing into place. And once it's all stitched up, this is how it looks. So now that my shoulder seam and hem are taken care of, I just need to gather down that inner edge. So off camera, I've went ahead and completed one side of my bodice, and whilst I was constructing it, I decided to add some of that gorgeous laddering along those princess seams. So I've just cut myself a couple of strips of that laddering, giving myself a 1 centimeter seam allowance on each side. I've trimmed down the fabric on my bodice on each side of the princess seam to compensate for that extra little bit of fabric of the laddering, and here I'm just sandwiching it in between the front and back bodice pieces and the front and back side panels. And this was like a last minute addition. I hadn't thought about this beforehand, but I'm super happy I did add it because it is absolutely gorgeous. So that's my bodice all constructed, and for the sleeve I've cut this on the cross grain just because I want that laddering to go across the fabric rather than down, and also because I didn't have enough fabric to cut it any other way. And for the skirt pieces I've done exactly the same, so cut it on the cross grain, and I've taken off here probably about 6 or 8 inches from the upper skirt and left my tiered piece the same length as the linen version. So off camera I completed the construction, and this is what I get. So my bodice front and back are lined. I got that gorgeous laddering at the center front and at the princess seams. I've added that same elastic to the cuff of the sleeve as I did on the linen version, and the same detail to the top of the tier on the skirt. I've also lined the skirt, gave myself a double folded hem, and then on the back that same laddering detail, the elastic in at the back waist, and that gorgeous ruffle. And this is how it looks on. So I think between both of these dresses I've managed to hit all of the design details from the next inspiration dress. I've added a few extra touches of my own, and I am over the moon with the outcome. This broderie anglaise was a real challenge to work with, just because it had so many patterns within it. I had to really think about every single detail, what panel would fit against what. This really did at times hurt my head, but I'm very glad I used it. I have another piece of broderie anglaise in my stash, which now I am raring to have a go at. So hopefully this video answers the question as to where I get my inspiration from and the whole process between inspiration and end design.
So as I said in the intro, this was something a little bit different from me. If it's something you're interested in seeing going forward, give this video a thumbs up. If you've not yet subscribed, please do, and I shall see you on Friday. Until then, I hope you have a fantastic week. Bye, folks!